What would you do if you learned that your family's very foundation was built on a lie so dark it could destroy generations? In the quiet, fog-covered town of Millbrook, Vermont, such a secret hid for decades, buried beneath the respected name of the Caldwell family. It was 1937 when 15-year-old Thomas Caldwell uncovered the truth. He was a serious boy, deeply protective of his 7-year-old brother James. While the family seemed ordinary, cracks ran beneath the surface. Their father, Edward, was a well-known banker, and their mother, Margaret, was often unwell and confined to the upper floors of their Victorian home. Neighbors noticed how Edward rarely spoke to Thomas, treating him with an odd, formal distance. One cold November morning, Thomas searched the attic for winter clothes and discovered a locked cedar chest. Using a hairpin, he opened it to find letters, photographs, and his mother's journal, written when she was a teenager. As he read, he felt his world shift. The early entries seemed normal, but soon Margaret wrote of fear, illness, and time spent in a sanitarium in 1922. Medical notes hinted at a hidden pregnancy, covered up by her father, Judge Augustus Walsh. Among the papers was a damaged birth certificate. The child listed was Thomas Walsh, born June 12, 1922. It was his own birthday. Letters revealed the shocking truth. Judge Walsh, his own grandfather, had been the father. Thomas was not Edward Caldwell's son, but the result of a secret his mother had carried in silence. For days, Thomas kept the discovery to himself, still caring for James while reeling from the knowledge. The family's housekeeper, Eliza Morton, who had once accompanied Margaret to the sanitarium, eventually realized what Thomas had found. She confirmed that Edward Caldwell had agreed to marry Margaret under Judge Walsh's conditions, presenting Thomas to the world as their adopted child. In return, Edward gained wealth and influence during the Depression. But the secrets went further. Records suggested that James, believed to be the natural son of Edward and Margaret, was born through disturbing means. Hidden medical files described experimental procedures in which genetic material was taken from Thomas as a child and used to conceive James. A letter from the clinic hinted this had been arranged by Judge Walsh, who sought to create what he called a pure lineage. When Thomas confronted Edward with the evidence, Edward admitted the deception but offered him a choice: keep the secret and protect James, or expose the truth and ruin them all. Instead, Thomas documented everything, making secret copies of the files and hiding them in different locations. His confrontation with Judge Walsh soon followed. The next day, the judge suffered a stroke. While investigating further, Thomas uncovered courthouse records showing that Walsh had orchestrated similar arrangements for other families in the region, forming part of a wider network obsessed with genetic purity. They called themselves the Lineage, a hidden group of men with power in law, science, and medicine. By late 1937, the family was collapsing. Edward Caldwell was later found dead in his study, officially ruled a suicide, though evidence suggested otherwise. Margaret withdrew into a silent, fragile state, while James, still unaware of the truth, clung to Thomas for care and stability. At only 15 years old, Thomas was left carrying the unbearable weight of what he had uncovered, knowing he was both brother and father to James, a consequence of choices forced upon him long before he ever had a say. The Caldwell family's secrets might have stayed hidden forever if not for Martin Reynolds. He had noticed Thomas's troubled state and the suspicious circumstances around Edward Caldwell's death. Curious, he reviewed the documents Thomas had trusted him with, and what he saw pushed him to alert state authorities. Investigators arrived in Millbrook on February 3, 1938. At first, they were there only to review Edward's supposed suicide, but soon they uncovered traces of the larger conspiracy Judge Walsh had overseen for years. Walsh, still weak from his stroke, was taken into custody but died before charges could be brought. Margaret was placed in a state hospital, where she lived until her death in 1952. James was sent into foster care, kept in the dark about his true parentage, and Thomas was placed under state protection with a new identity to shield him from those who might want him silenced. The case expanded beyond Vermont, eventually drawing in federal authorities. Many findings were sealed from the public, with officials telling locals only that Walsh had been guilty of financial misconduct leading to Edward Caldwell's death. Most residents accepted this version, though rumors continued to circulate for generations. The Caldwell home stood abandoned for decades, whispered about by townsfolk and avoided by families. Children claimed to see figures in its windows, especially on Halloween. The most complete record of what happened came years later, when historian Dr. Harold Fleming interviewed Thomas, by then living as Thomas Miller, in 1977. At 55, Thomas was retired after a career as a postal inspector. He never married, explaining that he didn't want to pass on what he called the Walsh taint. He stayed in contact with James over the years but never revealed their true connection. In these interviews, Thomas admitted he still feared that not all members of the secret group, the lineage, had been exposed. His fears seemed justified. In 1983, investigators uncovered disturbing practices at a Burlington fertility clinic, overseen by the grandson of one of Walsh's former associates. Soon after, more unsettling evidence surfaced of researchers influenced by lineage philosophies. These echoes suggested that while the original conspiracy had ended, its ideas had not disappeared. Until his death in 1988, Thomas remained dedicated to documenting every lead, keeping detailed journals about the lineage and its possible modern ties. His last entry warned against humanity's growing temptation to manipulate genetics in the name of improvement. He urged vigilance, calling it the only safeguard against repeating past horrors. After his death, his archives were secured by the Vermont Historical Society, with access limited to trusted researchers. In 2005, Vermont Public Broadcasting aired a cautious documentary about the Caldwell case, Shadows of Millbrook, which raised awareness about the dangers of eugenics while avoiding the most disturbing details. 2 years later, the Caldwell house was demolished, replaced by a park dedicated to those who had suffered under the lineage's schemes. James Caldwell passed away in 2010, never knowing the truth about his origins. His family lives on in Vermont, unaware of their connection to the case. The committee overseeing the Caldwell archives chose not to reveal the full story, believing it would cause more pain than justice. Yet with the rise of consumer DNA testing, questions remain about whether such secrets can truly stay hidden. Thomas's story serves as a warning. It reminds us that behind ordinary appearances, there can be extraordinary darkness. It shows how respected figures can commit terrible acts under the guise of higher purpose. And it demonstrates how one boy, burdened with a devastating truth, chose compassion over vengeance by protecting his younger brother. Today, children play in the park where the Caldwell home once stood. Their laughter has replaced the silence and fear that once haunted the place. Still, the echoes of the past remain, a reminder that vigilance is always necessary, and that dignity and humanity must never be sacrificed to dangerous ideas about control and purity.